Good evening. I'll call this meeting of the Waco ISD Board of Trustees to order. First on our agenda is public comments. I've Received two. Mr. Holmstrom, are you here? Welcome.
Dear Waco ISD School Board members, thank you for taking the time and allowing me to express my concerns. I've been employed by the district for the past few years and am so incredibly thankful for the campus that I am at and the support that I have received. I am speaking to you as a concerned educator to make a request as we continue to navigate teaching in the middle of a pandemic. I'm concerned for my health, the health of my students, and the health of my family, who I come home to each and every night. On January 4th, the first day back to school, I went to take a PCR test provided by Waco ISD after getting done with work. I was not symptomatic. However, out of an abundance of caution and due to other people that I had been in contact with, I decided to take the test. I did not receive my test results until 17 days later. I called numerous days in a row, never received an answer other than "we are backed up," and did not expect such a large response. I understand things are outside of your control, but 17 days is unacceptable. Rapid tests were then pulled from campuses. Testing hours after the first week of school, and still to this day, remain to be from 9 to 3. I am positive that there is not one full-time employee that can take that time off without taking the actual time off to go get tested with those testing hours. If I did have symptoms, I would have stayed home for 5 days and used 5 personal days for my already limited time bank that we get as teachers to find out my test was negative. I would have used half my time that we got for the entire year. With cases still on the rise, there is a large chance that I would possibly have to use the remaining 5 days that I get for the school year this semester alone. I understand that days provided for COVID-19 sick leave were eliminated during the 2021 school year. I am, however, asking for Waco ISD to use ESSER funds or whatever budget at all possible to cover teacher sick days if exposed and they are vaccinated. Killeen ISD, Dallas ISD, Austin ISD, and Leander ISD are just a few school districts that have implemented a 5-day emergency COVID pay for employees so they do not have to use their own personal leave. There's only so much we can do to protect ourselves, such as wearing a mask and getting vaccinated. Like I said, if I have to quarantine twice, I am out of leave that I have obtained for the entire year. Leave that is incredibly valuable to me. You see, my wife is pregnant, and we are expecting our first child at the end of July. Neither Texas nor Waco ISD offer any maternity or paternity leave. FMLA is guaranteed, but FMLA only protects your job. As a result, every sick day I use is a day less that I can take off with my future child without going absent without pay. Thank you for your time and consideration in this matter. I understand that for some this can be scary to speak to a board as a current employee and one that has future ambitions in administration. However, I believe that it needs to be addressed with the board as those are the ones that have the power to make an impactful decision such as this. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for coming tonight to speak to us. I appreciate it. And thank you for what you do for our kids. Let's see, next I have Mr. Early or Early. Yes, sir. Please approach the mic. And there are some photographs here. Would you like me to pass these?
Yes.
Around? Okay. And I failed to, I didn't read my standard statement about items that aren't on the agenda. The board doesn't have the ability to have conversations with folks who come up in public comment, and each person who approaches the mic has 3 minutes. And it looks like Mr. Vidania had already been timing, so he'll let you know when your 3 minutes is up. But go ahead, and I will pass your photos around.
Okay, thank you. Okay, on December 12th, I drove by the Paul Tyson Field because every once in a while I go check on it because I'm going to bid on the demolition through the county. Through Dustin Chapman said they're going to develop a packet and stuff. I talked to him. He said the coach's box has to be abated now. It's got asbestos in it. That's another problem. I drove by December 12th, it was on a Sunday. I saw some bleachers missing on the visitor side. I drove around, pulled in there. There was several people in there, and I said, well, who's the boss? I walked up and met Jeff Bray, who is a CTE instructor over Waco High. I believe that's what he does. He told me that he had a deal with Coach Tutsa to take down the visitor side. I said, really? and then the other side will be bid on. I said, well, what I was told and been told over 5 or 6 years, that the whole field is going to be a bid deal because of the safety, the construction equipment need to be used, the lights that have to be taken down, and the abatement. Okay, I left. Monday I called and I talked to the maintenance director. He went down there. The gates were shut then because the gates were open on Sunday. I talked to him probably 2 or 3 times. He told me the deal was that the county owned the property and was leasing it for like $1 or something to the school till the new construction, the field and all were built. And then the process would take place. So I called the sheriff department. The sheriff department referred me to the Wake School Police. Met the school police out there, Mr. Aguilera, and he took pictures. I showed him the text that I had from Jeff Bray. He went to talk to Jeff Bray. He called me later that day and said that Jeff Bray was going to bring back the bleacher purlins that they took down. They took down over 70 feet, 22 feet per row. New is $9. Used is about $4. Take them to Lipschitz, it's about 75 cents a pound. I met him. He introduced me to a dairy farmer and 2 young guys that were there, and it just didn't look good because I didn't know the school had a buddy system. I thought it was supposed to be a bid system. Well, then I found out through another friend that it wasn't TUSA, it was somebody else. It's been December 12th, nothing's been resolved yet. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. Although I think we're been aware of this situation, but we appreciate you addressing the board. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the board at this time? I haven't received any other requests. Okay, the board is slated to go into closed session. We don't think that we'll be very long tonight. However, if the AP Scholar students were told to be here at 6, and I don't know who's in charge of that group, I would like to recognize those students and their families now so they don't have to wait. But I don't want to miss students who, if they were told a later time.
6 o'clock.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do that while their families are here. Thank you.
Thank you. So our first recognition for the night is going to be recognizing our advanced placement scholars. And the College Board has named 27 Waco ISD school students as AP scholars for their college.
I hate to interrupt you. Do you mind taking off your mask as you're speaking? It's hard to understand, and I think you're safe there. Thank you.
So much better. The Waco ISD high school students as AP scholars for their college level of achievement on advanced placement exams taken last spring. The awards are divided into 4 categories: AP Scholars with Honors, AP Scholars with Distinction, and National AP Scholars. So the following Waco ISD students received scores of 3 or higher on their 3 or more AP exams, qualifying them as an AP Scholar. So I'm going to have everyone come up, and please stay up here until all of the names are called, and then we will take a group photo. For our Waco High School scholars, Bailey Barton, Kayla Cho, Cheryl Fast, Noah Garner, Helen Goodman, Noah Monreal, Alicia Ramirez, Vivanna Ramirez, Brandon Rodriguez, Elijah Sharam, Karen Salazar, and this is University High School, Elizabeth Sanchez, Genesis Santos. And Hunter Torres. The following students received an average score of at least 3.5 on all exams taken and scores of 3 or higher on 4 or more of these exams, qualifying them as an AP Scholar with Honors. Waco High School, Scholar with Honors. Calla Carlson. Xander Lim. Emmy Scott. Noah Workney. And University High, Scholar with Honor, Maricela Suarez. The following students received an average score of at least 3.5 on all AP exams taken and scores of 3 or higher on 5 or more of these exams, qualifying them as an AP Scholar with Distinction. Waco High School, Scholar with Distinction, Lily Kaufman. Bonnie Gibson, Evelyn Guevara, John Martinez, David Robertson, Talia Tran, Abigail Zimmerman, and University High School Scholar with Distinction, Karen Rodriguez. Congratulations to each of our AP Scholars for their extraordinary achievement.
Everybody like, they already finished.
Calla Carlson. Take a group picture.
And Alice is, okay, is that the group photo? They're probably going to need to squeeze together. And I don't know if people really appreciate what an accomplishment this is. To take one AP test and score a 3 or better is a feat in of itself, but to take multiple, and then some of these kids have taken 5 and scored above a 3.5 is extraordinary, and we are really proud of you, and we know you're going to go far. And are you getting a good photo, or do you need them to move in? Okay. Okay, better? That'd be great. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Congratulations.
And those parents that are here tonight, if you don't mind standing so we can recognize you, because the kids didn't do this alone. Thank you so much. Thank you. Is there anyone else who was told to be here at 6 that we need to recognize at this time? No? Okay. Well, at this time, then, the board is going to go into closed session in accordance with Texas Government Code Sections 551.071, .072, and .074. We do not anticipate being there long tonight, and I would guess we will be able to return no later than 7. Oh, okay. Well, yes, please, come forward. Yeah. I'm looking around the room trying to get, it's hard, catching eyes to make sure we got everybody, but I do not want you to have to sit and wait. Thank you for raising your hand, yeah.
Hey. Our next recognition goes to Alexandra Ronnenberg, who served as interim teacher at Waco ISD in 2020-2021 school year. She graduated from Baylor University with a Bachelor of Science in Elementary Education and is currently a second grade teacher at Hillcrest PDS. Ms. Ronnenberg has recently been recognized as Clinical Teacher of the Year for the state of Texas from the Texas Directors of Field Experience, the organization who supervises field experiences. The award honors senior-level teacher education students and was presented at a statewide meeting this fall at the consortium of the state's organization for Texas teacher education. Congratulations on your recognition, and thank you for everything that you do.
Well, and I think it says a lot that as a teacher, she was able to stop us and say, hey, what about me? So we appreciate you, and thank you for coming tonight and allowing us to recognize you. Okay, last call. Is there anyone else? Okay, thank you. We will return by 7 o'clock. All right, the board will reconvene in open session. We have been in closed session under Texas Government Code sections 551, 72, and 551, 71, 72, and 74. No action was taken. And at this time, I ask everyone to pause for just a moment as we take time for prayer, contemplation, reflection, or meditation. Thank you. All right, now, Pledge of Allegiance. I see we have a special guest tonight who is going to lead us in the pledge.
Yes, we have Mr. Wildebaldo Willie Hymas from Cedar Ridge PDS Elementary. Ready?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Willie's a fourth grader, and his favorite subject is writing. He likes to draw and wants to be a teacher when he grows up. Willie's a great student with a positive attitude and always has a smile on his face. Thank you to Willie's parents, Rafaela and Wildebaldo Hymas, for sharing your wonderful son with us. And thank you to Principal Aaron Lange for sharing your talented student with us tonight.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Appreciate it. All right, special recognitions. For those folks who have joined us since we were in closed session, we had a large group of AP scholars who were here at 6, and so we recognized them at 6. They were here with their families. And we also recognized our clinical teacher of the year at that time, because she was here as well.
Yes, Madam President. We're going to move on to our gubernatorial appointment to the newly created Industry-Based Certification Advisory Council. And we're going to recognize Donna McKethan, Director of our Career and Technical Education, for her recent appointment by Governor Greg Abbott to the Industry-Based Certification Advisory Council, which is a statewide advisory council established to advise the Texas Workforce Commission regarding the alignment of public high school career technology education programs with current and future workforce needs in communities, regions, and the state. Ms. McKethan will serve a 4-year term on a 9-member council, which represents industry in the state, public education, and public colleges. Congratulations.
Ms. McKethan, it seems like it was so long ago when you got the news, right? Isn't that what you took the oath for in front of Judge Felton? And we were there. Yeah, I thought, okay. It could have been something else because you represent us so well. across the state and the nation, yeah. Thank you.
We are now going to honor our outstanding community partner, Shepherd's Heart. Each month, we recognize a community partner making a difference for students with the Waco ISD Award Outstanding Community Partners. The recognition celebrates the theme for the 2021-2022 school year, We Are Waco ISD, and acknowledges that it's not just our employees and students that make Waco ISD an amazing place to be. I would like to invite Shepherd's Heart Executive Director Robert Gager, Chief Financial Officer Howard Jackson, Pantry Manager Kathy Torres to accept the award. And I would like to read a little bit about Shepherd's Heart. In January, the district is recognizing them, and it's been really just hard due to COVID. Shepherd's Heart had to change their distribution from in-person pantry style, where people could actually come in and shop, to completely mobile distributions throughout the Waco area. They went from just 4 distributions a month via the pantry model to 16 completely mobile distributions to provide a wide range of fresh fruit, staple items, and meat. Last year, they created food pantries inside Waco High School, University High, and Brazos High School. So this is accomplished in working with the school counselors and keeping the items of food in a protected area. And their only request is when a student needs food, to give it to them. If they need a snack to get them through the day, give it to them. If they need something to take home for a meal, give it to them. So they believe that if we can keep a student's attention in class, we have the opportunity to educate them out of poverty. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, each year Texas Association of School Boards encourages districts to celebrate School Board Recognition Month during the month of January. Our school board members are volunteers who share a passion for public education and for Waco ISD. These 6 individuals have the common goal of consistently focusing on the current and future success of Waco ISD students and staff and the district as a whole. They represent our community and serve as a link between the community and the classroom. The theme for this year's School Board Recognition Month is Rising Above, and it's fitting for these individuals who do so much and have done so much in the past 2 years as we faced a global pandemic. While addressing issues related to challenges with COVID, they also tirelessly work to pass a bond that will provide equity throughout the district and have continuously provided support for Waco ISD students and staff. Please turn your attention to this brief video where some of our very special community members wanted to share how important our Waco ISD trustees are to them.
Thank you, Waco ISD School Board.
Thank you for leading us into the future.
Thank you for your leadership and commitment to the students.
Staff and community, for creating opportunities
for us to learn as much as possible.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your dedication and hard work.
We appreciate all the time you spent serving.
Thank you for making big and important decisions that impact our education.
Gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you for caring about us.
Us.
And us.
Me. And me.
We appreciate our Waco ISD School Board.
Our trustees are spectacular, and we benefit daily from their dedication. They each bring something special to the table that helps provide a strong foundation for Waco ISD. Angela Tikal, President, District 4, is in her 12th year of service with Waco ISD. She's led the district through one of her hardest times in education. The pandemic presented new challenges we've never faced before, and President Tikal was a beacon of strength and stability. It's a testament to her leadership that we were able to pass a $355 million bond program, which will build the foundation for generations of students for many years to come. Thank you, President Tikal. Stephanie Cordaweg, Vice President, District 2, is in her 7th year of service to Waco ISD. An educator herself, Vice President Cordeweg has remained connected to her roots as a classroom teacher. This perspective allows her to view things through an educator's lens with a focus on how a decision will affect our teachers. Trustee Cordeweg is a steadfast advocate for listening to and engaging our community. Thank you, Vice President Tikel.
They are getting some really fun things because we're about to have some major construction projects. So there's a nice tool and a thermos and some cookies, and so just fun stuff for you guys.
Yes. And Jose Vidania, Secretary District 3, is in his third year of service to Waco ISD. Secretary Vidania may not always be the loudest voice, but when he speaks, it's always thoughtful and rooted in his deep connection to the South Waco community. He knows everyone in his district, and everyone knows Trustee Vidania. He is well respected and an active booster. In fact, as a university high school graduate, he continues to be one of the Trojans' biggest fans. Thank you, Secretary Vidania. Keith Guillory, trustee at large, is in his first year of service and is an active member of the community. As both a deputy fire marshal and a board member, Lieutenant Guillory was at the scene of the fire the night G.W. Carver burned. It's not unusual to find Trustee Guillory wearing more than one hat in his service to our community. A caring neighbor, he is always also the founder of Tell the World Ministries, Literacy Intervention Team Waco, and the Forever Young Scholarship, which is dedicated to breaking the silence against domestic violence. Thank you, Lieutenant Guillory. Jeremy Davis, trustee District 1, is in his first year of service and is an avid supporter of our youth. In addition to serving on the board, Trustee Davis is the founder of Mentor Waco, where he works to assist students in academic achievement and improved behavior. Being the son of a preacher taught him how to serve and the importance of making a difference in the lives of others. He cares about our kids and the community. Trustee Davis is a true advocate for the student voice in education. Thank you, Trustee Davis. Emily Iazetti, trustee District 5, is in her first year of service and has been a great asset to Waco ISD. A former reporter and current adjunct member of the Baylor University Department of Journalism, Public Relations, and New Media, she utilized her journalism experience to assist the district in getting the bond passed. Trustee Iazetti currently serves on the Waco ISD Education Foundation and has been an advocate for students, women, and the community through her volunteer work. Ms. Iazetti is well-informed and always prepared. Thank you, Trustee Iazetti. The gifts presented to our trustees signify the work they've done in the last year. Waco ISD is literally under construction and will be for some time as we continue to work on building a strong foundation for our students and staff. The construction-themed gift was a collaboration between Core Construction, who gifted the thermos, which is a must-have for every construction worker, Rogers O'Brien Construction, who gifted a multi-tool with the inscription, "Creating a Better Future for All" in Waco ISD. Again, thank you to each trustee for all that you do. You're greatly appreciated.
You know, these are not easy times to be board members, and we just want to say thank you for all you do. We appreciate you very much.
Dr. Kincannon, Superintendent's report.
Okay, well, I have some more fun things. At least first item is, I'd like to introduce you to Gloria Barrera this evening. Gloria, come on up. Gloria is our new Chief Officer of Facilities and Operations. She starts next week on February the 1st, and we're excited to have her with us. She has 39 years of successful experience in the design and construction industry. Her career includes leadership positions with Corpus Christi ISD and Katy ISD, where she led and developed the construction department. She has extensive experience directing K-12 bond construction programs for small and large districts across the state. She's also had the opportunity to represent counties, cities, and colleges, but her passion has always been K-12 school districts. In her most recent position, Gloria served as the Vice President, Area Manager for Veneer Construction Management and Owner Representation Firm. She has a Bachelor of Science in Building Construction from Texas A&M University, and in 2019, she was named a Breakthrough Woman by the Greater Houston Women's Chamber of Commerce, and we feel so blessed to have Gloria join our team at Waco ISD, so we want to introduce her this evening.
Thank you so much for coming tonight. We are so excited to have you here. You've got a lot of work to do. I guess you know that.
Yes.
It's not an easy job, and you bring invaluable experience to the work, and we feel very blessed to have you. Thank you, and welcome to Waco. And I noticed the next thing on the report is the construction fair, which we have never had such a well-advertised and proactive construction fair, not in my time on the board, for sure, and since I've been involved with Waco ISD. So I don't want to steal your thunder, but I know you were a big part of that as well.
Do you want to let her say something?
Well, and if you'd like to say anything, or I see your note here, so I don't know who's going to talk more about the construction fair.
I'll do that.
Okay.
So, well, thank you very much. It is an honor and a privilege, and I'm so excited to get to work with Waco ISD. You know, Waco is one of those kind of secret towns almost, in which people don't know how awesome it is. And since I have been coming here and visiting and getting to know it better, I'm just more impressed every time. Before I met with Dr. Kincannon and her team in the interview, I did some research on, how did Waco ISD prepare for this bond? Because passing a bond of that magnitude during these times is just an amazing accomplishment. And what I found was very impressive, and that was the long-range facility planning process that the district went through. If every district would do that, they would all pass their bonds, but many don't. And so I just want to commend this board and the district for taking that and making that effort. It took, you engaged the community, you did all the right things, and you reap the benefits. You have what you need to provide for your students. So I'm happy to be here. I look forward to helping make it a success, and I'm here to serve you, so thank you.
Ms. Cordaway.
Ms. Barrera, I am so excited that you're here. I think your accolades and your credentials speak for themselves, but I'm also really excited that you are a woman in this industry for so long. It speaks even more of your skill and ability, and I was really excited to see you in this position, and I'm really excited to see, with all of your experience, really be able to carry us. So thank you for
Thank you.
being here.
Thank you.
We're getting ready to start building some schools. So.
Yes, we are.
We needed Gloria. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item under the superintendent's report is the construction fair. That was held last Wednesday, January the 19th, and that was hosted by Rogers O'Brien Construction. That's our contractor for Waco High School, and Core Construction, our contractor for GW Carver Middle School. And the purpose of that was to meet with local subcontractors regarding the two projects. The meeting was held at the Syntax Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, so I'd like to thank Alfred Solano, President and CEO of the Syntax Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and John Bible, President and CEO of the Syntax African American Chamber of Commerce, for being present. Both were there to welcome and provide remarks at the event. Also present were Sam Blango, President and Chairman of the Board of the National Association of Minority Contractors. Dr. Robert Muller was there from Waco ISD. Casey Nicholson was there from O'Connell Roberts Architects. And then Rogers O'Brien and Core each had multiple representatives at the event, including project and pre-construction managers. And it was notable to me that the president of Rogers O'Brien, Cisco Hobbs, was in attendance at the event. About 60 people signed in. But I'm told that the head count showed about 90 people showed up. Were you there, Mr. Guillory? You were there, so thank you for being there. And those who were in attendance learned more about the projects and how to do business with both of those contractors. Dr. Mueller said it was a highly successful event, and we just want to appreciate the work of our contractors and our architects to make this event happen. I've never seen this done, and for the two of them to collaborate and do that together was really special, and so appreciate everyone who was involved. Want to add anything?
No, just want to say thank you for the keeping their word as far as opening up the lines of communication with the local community, bringing in local talent, and also recruiting minority contractors as well. It was highly successful, standing room only, and so it was a great event, and I appreciate y'all putting it together.
Very good. Thank you for being there. Any questions about that event? We're going to talk about it a little bit more later. I think that maybe Jana or Doug are going to hit that in the presentation on Waco High School this evening. And then finally, the update to safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of services plan. I'm going to kick that one to Mr. DeBeer to provide that update. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, Dr. Kincannon, members of the board. I want to back up to give you just a little bit of context by going back to the summer before the 2020-21 school year when Waco ISD convened educators, families, wide range of groups to begin developing a plan for how we would mitigate the potential for COVID-19 to spread at our campuses during that school year and ensure that students had a continuity of instruction as they moved between different settings and regardless of the setting that they were in. The resulting plan really did guide how we launched that school year, and it's something we've been returning to and updating since then. Then in 2021, along with providing additional funding for school districts, the American Recovery Plan required school districts receiving that funding to develop and post plans like the one that we had developed the previous year and had been updating in the interim. Dubbed Safe Return to In-Person Instruction and Continuity of Services plans, the American Recovery Act also required school districts to undertake a formal review of those plans, soliciting input from stakeholders every 6 months, and posting updated plans on their website. We're completing that process tonight with this conversation at the board meeting, and we'll be posting the next iteration of our plan on the website tomorrow. Since the last formal review in July, we've experienced 2 new waves of the pandemic sparked by the Delta and Omicron variants of COVID-19. And while we're still seeing cases this week that are above where we were for much of the fall, the good news is that our numbers have been trending down consistently for not quite 2 weeks now. Those surges, though, new guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have prompted us to make changes in the Safe Return Plan, and I want to give you a very brief summary of some of the key changes that will be incorporated in the plan that you'll see online tomorrow. First, in September, as you're aware, Dr. Kincannon began requiring masks inside all of our facilities. In July, when we last revisited the plan, that wasn't something that we were anticipating. We actually had a bit of optimism that it might be something that we'd be able to drop before we finish this formal review process and had talked about what that would look like as we left for Christmas break. Unfortunately, obviously, with the current surge, that's something that still remains off in the future. Earlier this month, we also implemented changes to our testing program driven by changes in the state's testing program for school districts. As you heard earlier, there are a lot of frustrations, and we share them with what that testing program looked like, particularly in the first 2 weeks that we came back from winter break. For some context, we've actually participated now in 2 separate testing programs with the state as the state has changed how they're providing tests to school districts. Beginning in November of 2020, the state had a program through the Texas Department of Emergency Management that provided Binax Now rapid tests directly to school districts. School districts could then determine how to staff testing sites, how to deploy those tests. It was staff intensive, but gave us a great deal of flexibility. This past fall, the state phased out that testing program, and shortly before winter break, the last of our supply of tests provided through that program expired. So we now work with a new program through the Texas Education Agency and the Texas Department of State Health Services. The key difference is, instead of providing tests directly to school districts to allow them to position and distribute tests in the way that's most responsive to what they're seeing on the ground, this program gives school districts an allotment that they're able to use to purchase services and supplies from authorized vendors that the Texas Education Agency has identified. Working with one of those vendors, we set up the testing program that launched with the start of this semester after winter break. It's different in a couple of key ways. First, we're purchasing supplies of a different rapid test. It's still an antigen test, functions in a similar way, but what we've discovered with the first shipment of these tests, each box of tests comes with a control test to run to show that it's properly registering a positive test. The vast majority of boxes that we received don't actually register a positive test when you run the control. So we've had a supply of rapid tests but haven't been able to use them because they aren't functioning properly. And we've responded to that in a few ways. First, we're working with the company, with the vendor that the state selected, or one of the vendors the state selected, to get that supply replaced. However, it hasn't been replaced yet because, particularly with the surge, rapid tests are in demand everywhere. We've also pursued 2 other alternative sources of rapid tests through relationships that we have locally, and we expect to have more rapid tests in hand soon. But the end result is, right now, today, we don't have enough rapid tests to make rapid testing available on demand through every campus nurse's office. So we've made rapid testing available on demand at the stadium alongside the PCR testing site that's there. And we have a very limited supply in each nurse's office that's available for emergency situations, but isn't large enough to meet those responses. Our first priority at Rhiannon Settles has been working aggressively to push the company, and working with our partners locally is to increase the supply of rapid tests so we can get back to the point where we have the sort of broad spread on-demand rapid testing available at campuses. Because of what happened with the rapid testing, it changed our approach to PCR testing. Our initial approach to PCR testing was that this would be something used relatively infrequently. If we had someone who had a known exposure, who had COVID-19 symptoms, but was testing negative on a rapid test, we'd use the PCR test to confirm that. Because we didn't have a supply of rapid tests, and it took time to work through the boxes that we had and find boxes that were registering the positive control appropriately, for the first week of testing, we were dependent on our PCR tests. Those tests are administered. The testing site is staffed through the vendor that we're working with, one of the approved vendors through TEA. What happens is they collect the sample on site. That sample gets overnighted to a lab, and then the lab processes the PCR test. When we selected the vendor that we're working with today, they told us that from the time the lab received the test the next morning to when they'd have a result would be 24 to 48 hours. As you heard, particularly for people who took tests in that first week and even into the second week, it wasn't remotely close to that time frame. In many cases, we saw times well over a week to get those early PCR tests back. The good news is, in the last week, we've actually started to see the lab turn around some test results within 48 hours of when they've had the sample overnighted to them. The bad news is, for all of those tests that happened in the first 2 weeks, by the time we were getting test results back, we were outside the isolation window, so essentially they were of no value to us. That, I think, would have been a challenge anyway. I think it's likely that the vendor underestimated what they would be able to deliver, but in our particular case, it was exacerbated because we didn't have the rapid tests that were functioning properly that we could use as a first line of testing. It's certainly been a very frustrating and challenging situation. It's something that both our health services team and I have been working aggressively to find other sources of rapid tests and to rectify, and we're getting to a better place now. But that change in systems, that change in having a direct supply of tests and getting rapid tests that weren't registering the positive control correctly meant that our testing program just was not functioning in an acceptable way for the first couple weeks of the system. I think the shift to PCR tests would not have been as problematic as it was if the lab had been able to deliver the turnaround times that they pledged. But certainly all of those factors work together to make it worse than even just the delay in the turnaround times.
Kyle, I don't monitor our dashboard regularly anymore, but I'm wondering, that was such a mess, and understandably, like the teacher who was here earlier, it's very frustrating. I received a lot of questions, and I know that, and then the vendor, the relationship with TEA changed as well. The vendor we had then was
So
no
initially,
longer
we
approved.
didn't have a vendor. The state just procured tests and literally brought a truckload of tests to Waco ISD along with personal protective equipment to conduct the tests. Now, we've gone from working with the Texas Department of Emergency Management to TEA and State Health Services and are working through a vendor to secure tests. There is some added flexibility in that we're also able to secure some staffing. The testing site at the stadium is actually staffed by the vendor. They've had issues retaining staff at that site, and that's been another challenge.
I'm wondering, do we have an FAQ on our dashboard? Is there a way I understand that you guys are working with a rapidly changing situation in the middle of a surge where we have staffing shortages as well. I'm very sympathetic to the gentleman who spoke earlier because he wasn't alone. There were a lot of people who tested who never got their test results. And if you have the capacity, and maybe you don't, but it'd be nice to have that kind of information available on our dashboard so people can get some answers or just understand. These days it's COVID is the excuse for most things, and it's sadly true most of the time, and this is like a cluster of COVID. So anyway, just to the extent that we can communicate, that's so complicated.
It's complicated, and we, I want to remind you all that we opted to participate in the testing program. It's not something we had to do as a school district, and many school districts aren't doing that. But we certainly have benefited from the program by the state, from the free tests. I think Rhiannon did a tremendous job given the situation she found herself in after the holidays with the bad batches of control tests, however you frame those, and then the company being delayed. Just a tremendous job, and I think she was even able to supplement with some of the old ones that we had while we were waiting on PCR results. So yet another COVID challenge we faced.
Kyle, I want to thank you guys for being able to pivot so quickly and kind of being dealt a hand by TEA. I think, is there any way that we can provide TA feedback that there may be vendor system kind of going through specific pain points for them? Do they have a mechanism for that? Because it seems to me that the testing that was delivered to us, we were able to utilize quickly. We were able to really kind of, get it done on campus, get this testing. You guys have, again, done a fantastic job, but, from my understanding, it went from that to TEA then gets a vendor. The vendor's kind of dropping the ball. The lab's kind of dropping the ball. So is there some type of feedback mechanism for TEA that says, hey, maybe we can vet the vendors a little bit better?
I think we have shared some of that. And I think in fairness to TEA, their intention was to offer some greater flexibility to school districts and try and provide some ways that school districts weren't as responsible for directly providing the manpower for testing. I think it came from a good place, but this vendor clearly wasn't prepared for what would happen when however many school districts they signed up began sending them tests.
Madam President.
Are we still making booster shots available in the district?
We are. We have vaccination clinics with all types of shots typically at least twice a week at our campuses. Those rotate around to different campuses, and those are being hosted in partnership with the Waco-McLennan County Public Health District, and we really appreciate that partnership. Folks can get first shots, second shots, booster shots. And actually, I believe they were at Provident Heights this evening. They may still be there or just wrapping up from a clinic. And like I said, we typically have at least 2 of those every week.
Yes, I just had a question. You said that the tests that are on campus that are available, they're only used in emergency situations. What would an emergency situation be for why a kid would be eligible to get that COVID test?
So broadly, I think we have kind of, there's not a set criteria, but we have kind of 2 big groups of people who tend to test. On the one hand, you've got folks who may not be experiencing symptoms, but are anxious and are looking for reassurance that they don't have COVID. We're not wanting to use right now, because of the limited supply, the on-campus test for those folks. Where we have students that are experiencing symptoms during the day, employees who develop symptoms during the day, and they need that test to know if they can stay on campus or if we need to get them to isolate quickly, that's the scenario that we're doing right now. But we hope very quickly to increase the supply of rapid tests at all of our campuses and be able to return to the type of availability that we had before.
Great. And I think another question I had, so you said it was 2 weeks of testing that was kind of delayed by the vendor. So were those people contacted so were they let know, like, hey, we had a mix up with the vendor, your COVID test may not be coming back, make another plan, or are they just waiting and they don't know?
At this point, we've been told that everyone in those first 2 weeks should have results. Now, anecdotally, I would say I hear 1 or 2 cases every day, every other day of someone who hasn't found their results yet. In some cases, it's emails that have gone to spam filters. In other cases, we are needing to track it down, and we can certainly confirm for them. But at this point, everyone who tested in those first 2 weeks should have results, and if they haven't got them, they can certainly reach out to me, and we can figure out what the case is.
That's my last question. I'm going to leave you alone after this, Kyle. So the vendor that we're working with, are we going to pick a new vendor? Is it an option to maybe shop around for other vendors? I just didn't hear that part. Maybe
there are, I believe at this point, 6 vendors that the state's approved. We're working with a vendor who actually is then in turn working with sort of 2 sub-vendors. So the vendor we work with provides the tests to us. We purchase both the PCR and the rapid test through them, and they staff the testing site at the stadium. They, in turn, are working with a separate company to run the PCR tests and another company for their electronic reporting system. The challenge we have is that there is an onboarding process, and I think we started identifying vendors and working with vendors probably early to mid-October. I don't remember the exact date. And so there's a tension between wanting to push this vendor to turn around results faster, push this vendor to replace the rapid tests that aren't registering the positive control correctly, and taking the time and having the gap to start over. So that is something we're wrestling with.
Might be harder to switch than it is to keep moving forward.
That's been the concern so far.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. The only other change that I would highlight that's significant in the plan that's posted tomorrow is the CDC's also changed their guidance since we last formally reviewed the plan on isolation time periods. For most people, they now recommend that you isolate for 5 days from either the onset of symptoms or a positive test if you're asymptomatic, and allow the isolation period to end after those 5 days as long as you've been fever-free for at least 24 hours and your symptoms have improved. And we've incorporated that timeline into our own isolation practices as well. Obviously, we'll undertake another formal review in the summer, but between now and then, we'll continue to update regularly, just as we did this past semester, just as we did the year before. And as developments warrant, whether that's changes in local public health conditions, changes in recommendations from state and federal agencies, or legal developments around the state, will adjust accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Consent agenda. I have been asked to pull items 8K and 8M. Also, we had some questions tonight about the first reading Board Policy Update 118, but I got some very excited volunteers for a new policy committee, and want to thank those people for stepping forward. So Vice President Cordaweg, Mr. Guillory, and Mr. Davis graciously agreed to serve on a policy committee, and they will meet in the next month and then come back and make recommendations to the board before we approve Update 118 in February. So absent 8K and 8M, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Madam President, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented, except for 8K and 8M.
Thank you, Ms. Cordaway. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guillory. I could have given it to Mr. Verdoni because I saw movement over here first, but I heard your voice first. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. All right. 8K, resolution to convene the School Health Advisory Council to recommend curriculum materials for human sexuality instruction. Ms. Kornblum.
Good evening.
I don't know if there was a specific question you want to ask, or just would you like Ms. Kornblum to present? Is there a specific question about the proposed resolution?
See, it was a council that was supposed to be set up here, and I want to know how are those members selected, and what would that look like as far as them, forming that curriculum?
So the district has, by law, has a Student Health Advisory Council. That committee is already in operation and has to be yearly. So that is not my committee. Actually, Suzanne Hamilton.
The board approved that committee, 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah.
It was in a consent agenda.
Right. And it runs under Student Services. That's the department. And so there are required members such as teachers, counselors. I can't remember all the members, actually.
A couple of parents, the nurse.
Parents,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, policy requires that the majority of the committee be parents.
And so it is also required by Education Code that committee review curriculum for a human sexuality course, if we so choose to offer that.
So the resolution provides or gives us the authority to move forward with the review of the curriculum materials, to convene the committee to review those. And that's I believe that's a new requirement by the state legislature, that you all approve that.
Right.
And that's something you've not done before. And so that is really all this is doing, is asking for permission to move forward in reviewing the curriculum. And the SHAC, of course, recommends the curriculum, and the board has the final authority for approving sexual.
This is something that's already in the district, but the state standards changed. Therefore, we have to review and see where we are with that.
Ms. Corwin?
Yeah, and Ms. Kornblum, isn't it, oh gosh, I think the recently legislation said that the SHAC, like their meeting minutes are recorded, so we can see.
Correct. They're posted.
They're posted.
Exactly.
So if we have access to those meetings.
Yes, you do.
Where would they be posted?
They're on our website.
Those are now posted as public meetings, and that's a new state requirement as well.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I'll entertain a motion on 8K. Just waiting on a motion to approve.
I move that we approve the
Item 8K.
item 8K.
Thank you, Ms. Cordaway. A second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Izzetti. Is there any further discussion or questions?
I had a question. I was just wondering how are members appointed to the board? I understand, who's on the board, but how are those people selected? That would be my only question.
Suzanne leads our SHAC committee. She'll take that one.
So we have representatives from the campuses. We send out emails or we reach out and say if you have parents or teachers or people that want to be on the board, they submit those. And so honestly, I take any and all recommendations that I get from community members, parents, and teachers. We do have, of course, Rhiannon Sells on there, myself. We have some people, depending upon the topic, from curriculum that come and present to us, or we have some people from, whatever the topic is that we're looking at, we have people come in and talk. But we have mostly parents. We do have some high school students that sit in, and then again, we have some district people, depending upon what, area we're talking about that day. But all of those are accessible through the Student Services website. There's a SHAC place where I do have the posting and the minutes and the people that were there.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the resolution. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. Next is item 8M regarding a settlement with our insurer over the fire at Carver. And I want to thank Ms. Davis and Mr. Villanueva for his work in really getting a much more favorable settlement than we expected. And if you don't mind just publicly explaining briefly, because I know there are a lot of different components, about how much we will receive and kind of what the largest components of that settlement are.
So we did finally, in the last few weeks, kind of settle with our insurance carrier, TASB, on an amount for this settlement. And it basically consists of, the first part is the structure rebuild, and they're giving us $14.4 million for the structure itself, which includes about $1 million for upgrades to meet code, and then another $1.1 million for design and related fees on that project. So, and then we had some expenses on site right after the fire for fencing and security and abatement, which was another $132,000. So we're getting about $15.6 million for the building rebuild. As part of our policy, we're also getting another $500,000 for costs incurred in moving students over to the Carver students over to Indian Spring. Mostly that is for portables that we had to buy in order to accommodate those students, but there was some other cost as well. And then we had a consultant come in. As explained, it's very difficult to come up with a list of what was burned, of the contents in a fire. We had to do that in 2009 when we lost the vocational building at A.J. Moore, and I was glad we didn't have to go through that process again. But we had a consultant come in and do that, and we ended up getting $3.8 million for the contents of the buildings that were lost. So in total, the total loss amount will be $19.9 million, and our deductible is $100,000, so we're going to end up getting $19.8 million.
Very nice. Thank you. Ms. Cordaway?
Yeah, Ms. Davis and Mr. Villanueva, I just really want to commend you. I think when we were getting the preliminary numbers, it was kind of toddling between 12 and 14. And Mr. Villanueva, we heard that you were working very closely with TASB. And so we really just wanted to thank you for all that hard work, because $19.8 million was not what we were expecting. It was, and I know that you really did kind of put in the the labor. Ms. Davis informed us that you were side by side with him. Yeah. So really wanted to thank you guys for the work that you put in with that, and Ms. Davis, obviously, dealing with this unexpected tragedy.
And I told you, this was Alex's third claim with hail damage and winter storm damage and then fire. So he did a fantastic job.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you all for all your hard work. Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion now to approve the authorization for the superintendent to execute a release in favor of TASB Risk Management regarding G.W. Carver Middle School loss July of 2021.
I move that we accept the administration's recommendation to approve the authorization of the superintendent to execute the release in favor of the fund.
Thank you, Ms. Cordaway. Thank you, Mr. Vidania, for a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. All right. All right. O'Connell Robertson, I see you guys over there. Consider, discuss, take appropriate action regarding the design, development, and interior and exterior material selection and colors. Most important thing for Waco High School.
Well, good evening. Thank you all for being here. Jared sends his apologies. Out of an abundance of caution, he is staying away. So today we have the finished palette for the materials board for the Waco High School, and we're going to talk about that in depth. But for the last several months, we've still been continuing with a lot of community and staff engagement. And with that, Dr. Kincannon, you talked a little bit earlier about that, the fair that we had recently, and Doug's going to take us through some other pretty significant actions that we've seen.
All right, good evening. And so just a quick design development update for you all this evening, very similar to previously. You know, we just finished up our design development documents here in early January. Really excited to continue to move forward. We've shared those with Rogers O'Brien, Braylon's here tonight, and we're going to get really good feedback on those design development drawings. And so as we continue to step through, we'll start honing in on those details and sharpening our pencils on the details for the contract documents here over the next several months. You'll also see that we are looking here next week to issue our site development permit package. So that's not a GMP package, but that is a package that we send out early to support the site permitting process, which, as we know, is one of the lengthier permitting processes out there. So that's coming up here shortly. And if you want to go to the next slide. We talked about the construction fair earlier with Rogers O'Brien and Core. Really awesome event and had, again, really great participation. I don't know, Braylon, did you want to speak to that at all? I think it was a really good opportunity for them.
Good evening. We did have a great participation. As Dr. Kincannon said earlier, we had a much better expected turnout than we were expecting, so we look to continue forwarding, forming those relationships with our local trade partners. I am currently scouring all over Waco, talking with our trade partners and trying to get those relationships built and get them ready for the high school, so we're looking forward to it.
And so real quick, last thing on the design development update, and then I'll turn it over to Jana for the interiors presentation. Just wanted to share kind of the next steps from a scheduling standpoint. And you'll see I highlighted in bold there the GMP approval dates that we're anticipating. And so again, that first one coming up is going to be that site development permit. That's just for the permitting. And then we have the two main bid packages for some of those early procurement items that we're seeing, site, steel, and roofing, primarily being those long lead items. And then that final bid package there in the middle of the year, 1st of June. And so we'll continue to keep that unsisted. Yep.
What does GMP stand for?
Guaranteed maximum price. Any questions? Great.
We'll have lots of opportunity to talk about the bids and the board's approval of the guaranteed maximum price. In this case, in multiple packages rather than one big package. We're breaking it down to help with moving things along with COVID. So you're going to see a lot of items over the next several months related to both of these projects, and we'll be able to explain that along the way.
And Carver is actually broken into 3, so there's a total of 5, really just to facilitate some of those long lead items that we're seeing in the industry. So, all right, so I'll turn it over to Jana for the fun stuff.
Do you want to talk exterior materials? So when we talk about the exterior materials of the building, we really did a bit of trend spotting in the Waco community itself. So it's simply going around seeing what Waco is made of already, and let's be inspired by that and bring that into this campus. So that's where you see this brick patterns, some of the coloring of that brick, of course bringing in the school color of the red and some metal panels. And we use those in really intentional ways that are calling out to really cool, unique spaces in the building. So even as a community member that maybe you haven't going to step in there in a long time, you can see where the cool things are that are happening, and it feels like it's part of the overall context of Waco High. And we have those materials loose on the floor. We can bring them as well. They don't glue on a board well. When we come into the interior materials, these are the same materials that we see here. So we were really inspired by the history of Waco High itself. So there were 3 high schools originally that came together, consolidated into one high school. So we pulled some of the color palette that those 3 high schools had previously, made a couple of tweaks to them to make them cohesive, but really kind of bringing that legacy forward. And we've talked previously about some of those rooms and spaces that are going to help tell that story in history, and that's where this palette came from as well. So then bringing those materials from outside to inside, and then using them to really reinforce the Waco High academic programs of pride. So we're going to talk about pride for a little bit, and we've talked about it. Talk about personal responsibility, and what does that look like in a floor plan? And that looks like autonomy for students to choose a space to go learn. What does that look like in the material palette? That's these unique glass colors that you see in the bottom middle. So it's reflecting that unique individuality of students that are choosing to use these spaces. We talk about respect and integrity. We're seeing that as we are able to see through into all of these academic spaces. So you come into this main commons area. We're going to start this video. It's going to move a little fast. So this is coming into the front door. You can see all the way through down into the library, and then we instantly start walking through into the neighborhood. So this idea of respect is about understanding what is happening already and being able to acknowledge that and earn a respect for what's happening. So we enter through this colorful portal that's unique to this neighborhood. Instantly on our right is our teacher think tank space. And then we're right in the middle of education and learning. This is an open collaborative space with small group nooks on the side where students can pull off. These are typical classroom areas as well as small group areas. A direct connection to the outdoors through this. This classroom opens up completely and feeds into that collaboration space. And this whole collaboration zone is connected. This is a typical neighborhood. It's connected in this L form. We're going to peek into this teacher think tank. This part was really important for staff retention and appreciation of giving them a spot where they can go recharge, get some real work done, or really just get prepared to get back out there and do what they do every day. So this space was important. We spent a lot of time with the teachers figuring out what does that mean? What does a recharge space look and feel like for you all? So there's this textured material at the back of the break room wall, as well as island spaces, as well as some individual work areas. And so that looks the same. Each classroom neighborhood has this opportunity for their staff. They have somewhere to go.
They'll have their their copy machine in there. They'll have a mini lounge, sink and ice machine. And we wanted, that's huge for teachers, but it's their own space that they own, and the refrigerator and microwave and that kind of thing where they can be comfortable, but they can also collaborate with each other.
And it's strategically located. We're in the center of one neighborhood. So not only can staff monitor and see down all wings of that neighborhood, but students can see their own staff and teachers collaborating and working and being that model of what we want our students to be doing. So we're gonna take a right, this is still part of the same neighborhood, and we'll see how this connects back into the main corridor.
Madam President.
Mr. Guillory.
I do have a question about these classrooms. So that's not one-sided glass, so students can see outside in the hallway and people can see, okay. I'm thinking about disruptions and things like that. How does that work in other schools and models that you've seen? Because I'm thinking about, our high schools and our students going down the hallways and, and being disrupted during class time because of these, a lot of these glass and windows. So, speak on that.
It's a great question, and we get it all the time. So when we really dive in and study this, there's interest in nuance, or interest in things that we can't really make a picture out of. So if we can open this up to where I can see everything going on, it becomes a blip on my radar. My brain can figure out what that is, and I stay focused. And when we see this, we were able to tour a local high school where we had this. I don't know, Emily, if you want.
Which high school?
Sure. I'll jump in. I got to go with the team and with the team from Waco High to tour Lake Belton High School that was also designed by this team and has a lot of these very similar aspects in the neighborhood. And that was my initial first question is, there's no way that the students will be able to focus on what a teacher's saying. And we walked through with a group, and then we went down a different hall and walked through with just a couple of people. And in every class, you would see one student who would look and who would see who we were and then would refocus. But it was truly surprising at how much the students were able to stay focused on what the teachers were doing. And I was surprised. But it was very interesting to truly see it in practice when we were walking through the hallways.
Okay, so that's one thing for you to say that. So have y'all talked to any of our principals and teachers and asked them for their input on this right here?
Yeah, the team from Waco High was with us all on that tour.
We took teachers specifically to see that school for that reason, so they could see how it felt. And then we, of course, had user groups all along the way with the school administrators and teachers. So it's been a lot of input into that. But kids really do get used to this.
No, it's a gorgeous design. That was just a concern.
Yeah, it's a legitimate concern and a question that they get often. Yeah, and when you see it, you see how it works. But it's really it really does work well.
There's a couple of strategies that go into it. So when we talk about providing this idea for personal autonomy of choosing where to work, that comes with the trust that if I'm the teacher, I'm still focusing on 12 students, but I can still see you without having to peek, because it's a clear line of sight. And then from a building organization standpoint, this is not a main thoroughfare. This is for traffic coming into these classrooms. So it's a dedicated group that's supposed to be here in this space. The main thoroughfares circumvent and go around. And so that's all intentional to create this hub that spreads beyond the four walls of a classroom, and it allows for that growth and expansion.
Okay, last thing, that glass, the safety standpoint. I didn't get this. So the safety standpoint for is like active shooters, things like that, because we teach staff and students to hide. And so how does this help with that?
So it's a layered approach that starts from the site all the way into the campus. And so this building is broken up into compartments, and at each stage, a person could not get from one compartment to another. So you create zones that are capable of being safe instead of just individual rooms. And that zone, this zone that we're in, takes 4 layers you would have to get through until you could get here. So it buys time. And then the other strategy of opening up and being able to see. It's hard to hide and get caught if you are in a glass box. And so there's the strategy that comes from the law enforcement. So we do work with your local law enforcement and sit down with the plan and say, let's have the worst day of our lives. What does this look like, and how do we respond, and how does the building respond?
I have a question. So it's more on the active shooter thing. So the glass isn't bulletproof or anything. So if I'm in a pod and somebody that's an active shooter is in my pod, what do we do?
You get out. You go to the next compartment. So if for fire egress as well, you're not trapped in a box. And so that comes down to the local district policy as well. So we've worked with you guys on campus about what that looks like and making sure that we have doors in the right spot, that we have alarms in the right spot, and that it would facilitate the in-place policy for the campus.
And then the steps that you're saying you have to go through, are those like locked doors? Like it would be 4 locked doors that you would have to get through? Okay.
Could you, now I know, thank you guys, because I know we have a very aggressive timeline with Carver, and we've got an aggressive timeline with Waco High. We're pushing you guys to get things done. And so I think I was really impressed on our meeting, January the 12th, I believe. You guys had met with, I think, just even the Carver administration, teachers, like 13 times before even kind of presenting an initial design. And so I just, I thank you for that process of really meeting with local law enforcement and teachers and administrators and, upper level administrators, and then meeting with teachers again. And just, I appreciate the collaboration that you pull in people, their perspective, and I'm assuming that is the same process that you're doing with Waco High. And so,
yes, absolutely. Thank you. We appreciate it.
I think I stopped you mid-video, so carry on.
We have a few videos. Yeah. So this is walking down the second part of that corridor, again, looking into your typical sized classrooms, as well as some small breakout spaces. All of these have direct views from that teacher think tank, very intentional. As we go out towards the end of this corridor, this is that second entry portal into this neighborhood. We see some restrooms on the right, practical, but there they are. And we'll take a left and go into the main common space. So this is where it all comes together. Our library straight ahead across the room. The dining is happening around this space. We have a satellite kitchen to the left of us. That's what we see here in this glass. And then straight ahead is the main kitchen serving. So again, lessons learned through part of the merger is separating out those kitchen lines really created a much nicer environment. This is a little breakout space right at the front entry. It's quasi close to the counselor space. That was that arched ceiling that we saw. So creating a space where students can create a relationship with their counselors. Yeah. Oh, sorry. They can create a relationship with their counselors, and that's right behind the gentleman in the orange jacket, that curved glass. As well as once they go into the suite, it's all very private, so they can have that real conversation. Holding space for custom murals that are telling the story of Waco High. So we're working with the campus and Dr. Kincannon right now to develop that mural with your team, and we're holding a spot for it here, so it will continue to iterate. Oh, it starts over. Big open volume ceilings here with some wood beams coming across, a nice acoustic deck up high so it'll absorb that sound. We do have polished concrete floors. We were able to meet with your facilities team and talk through what materials are you guys wanting to maintain, what can you fix and remedy easily on campus, and that's what the generals of this palette were born from. So that's where you're seeing the tile wainscot happening along the edge, that polished concrete with a deeper grind. It looks beautiful. Lots of flexibility in these open collaboration areas with the types of furnishings that could be offered. And we'll turn and see how this connects. As a reminder, this site drops off towards the back. So we come in on the main level and then we step down. So the 2-story portion is actually down from the main entry. And this really tells that story here. So this is that main stairwell in the commons that leads out into that open courtyard space. It's science that we're seeing across the outdoor courtyard there. We're going to take a closer look at the library. So we have some academic spaces that open up onto this main commons area, as well as little areas for students to perch, sit down, have a breakaway. There's a coffee shop directly to our front right. The student store is on the left, so opportunity for merchandising and window display, really putting that career work on display. Coming into the library, that small group is the archives room, so a lot of visibility all the way from the front door into that archive space. And then, of course, our library with a large open volume, lots of natural light coming in, direct access to the outdoor commons, and as well as some small group rooms. These small group rooms are open ceiling, knowing that there's not a dedicated teacher in that space, so there's the sense of privacy, but we can always hear and see what's going on. And then direct connection to the DLC, the Digital Learning Center, is through that corner in the top left of the screen. So being able to open up that space and really have it function in a variety of ways. This is starting at the opposite end of Lions Way, is what that main street has been branded. And so starting over there, we see our gymnasiums to the right, and our fine arts programs are to the left. So putting, again, more program on display, things that students can see and aspire to want to check out and learn that they have a real gift or talent, or that they don't. Lots of display opportunities in these trophy cases. There's only one so far in our rendering. We need to earn some more in there. Digital display over on our left, so you can see what's happening inside of that Performing Arts Center. And then again into the gymnasium spot. So if we kept walking down this corridor, we would get back into that main commons area. So that connectivity again, that ease of monitoring. This is looking at the fine arts area, and we'll walk down the hallway. We have art on our right as we get down here, and we have display for art happening on our left. So these art rooms can open up onto the corridor, and they can spill out into that zone and really kind of take over. And students that are traversing up and down this hall are seeing student work. They're possibly seeing live work happening, a really active, robust space for the fine arts areas. We'll take a look into these art rooms. They do have direct access onto that courtyard as well as some kilns that are out there. And then last but not least, a weight room. This is for Coach Love, who's not here again. Good.
So we
Not really.
He had a conflict tonight, but yeah, we've just like given him a hard time.
And so with that, I hope you see how this is rooted in everything that we've learned from you all. We thank you for those collaboration meetings. They are really what inform and make this building. And so we thank you for that. If there's any other questions, we're happy to step through any of these lovely materials that you would like.
You know, part with the art room, so they'll be able to like lift the walls up or what?
Yes, they're like
okay.
doors.
Great. Jealous. I want to go to Waco High. I just want to go to Waco High.
I agree.
It's great work. Thank you so much. Thank y'all. Very exciting. All right, now how are we going to pay for it?
We've got to approve this first.
Oh, we've got to approve this first. Okay, so we're going to approve this first, and then we're going to go for how we're going to pay for it. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the design development as presented tonight.
Move.
Thank you, Mr. Guillory, and I think I heard Ms. Corley. Oh, Emily? Okay.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Izzetti. I have a motion, a second. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, passes unanimously. Okay, now, is Dusty back there? Ah, there you are, behind the post. Okay, this is a lot of words on here. So you're going to make it really
Blame
simple.
Rob for all the words.
Oh, you brought the lawyer with you.
That's right.
That explains some things. Yeah, welcome. Okay.
Well, good evening, everyone. Again, for the record, Dusty Traylor with RBC Capital Markets. We have the honor and privilege of serving Waco ISD as financial advisor. This is my first time to be in front of the board since the bond election passed. And so I just want to take a moment to just say congratulations. What I'm going to show you guys, and I'm sure you guys all know this, we're not to take these sorts of wins for granted, and especially this past election cycle. So kudos to Dr. Kincannon, your team, and your board here and the community for supporting this endeavor. If you'll turn with me, do I have a presentation up? All right, I do. I'm going to turn here to page number 1 inside the presentation just real quickly to just kind of give you a note for what I'm talking about here. What we're showing are the most recent election cycles going back to May of 2018. And if you'll look, the November election cycle only saw 45.95% of the propositions successfully pass, the lowest on record going back even beyond 2018. So the fact that you guys were so successful, again, speaks a testament to the communication you've had with the constituents here and demonstrating the needs. So again, congratulations. The next slide, we just show kind of the process moving forward with the issuance and what kind of some of the basic steps that will take place towards issuing the bonds. One, we've been working all along, working to create a plan of finance for this bond package and how we would sell the bonds and move forward. Determining a method of sale to sell the bonds. Shortly thereafter, after your successful election, we worked with the finance team, Cheryl, to help prepare the application to the TEA for the Permanent School Fund Guarantee. That's what gives the district the access to the TEA's PSF, which gives you AAA bond ratings when you go into the market. The district itself does not carry AAA ratings, but you get the access to the state's AAA. We've also been working closely to prepare a preliminary official statement. That's that acronym you see there, POS. That's the bond offering document that will be used to offer these securities in the bond market when we get ready to go out into the market. Then conduct credit rating meetings. We actually have credit rating conference calls next week. Dr. Kincannon and Cheryl will both be participating in those meetings with the credit rating agencies. Just an opportunity to present the finances and economy and plan for Waco ISD with the credit rating agencies moving forward before we sell. And then pricing of the bonds and the parameter resolution. So after approval of the action tonight and after we get the bond ratings in place, we'll be ready to move into the market with the first sale of the bonds. And so we'll go out in the market like we did last year with the refunding bonds, with your underwriting team, and have them sell the bonds to end investors, and we'll be watching them like a hawk to make sure that they are getting Waco ISD the appropriate interest rates on your bonds. Once the bonds are sold, then Mr. Collins and his team at Bracewell will be working the transaction through the Texas Attorney General's office. We need the Texas AG's review on all of these transactions in order to validate the bonds. That takes about 3 to 4 weeks after we sell. Once we get the AG's approval, that is when we can close and deliver the proceeds into the district's bank account. So from the time that we sell the bonds to the time the district gets the money, sometimes 3.5, 4 weeks before the money hits the bank account. And then once you close, there's all sorts of post-issuance compliance that takes place. There's financial and accounting reporting that has to go on. I bother Cheryl about this sort of stuff all the time. There's financial and accounting compliance that goes on, but then there's also some tax compliance work that I know Mr. Collins and his team will help you work through as you move forward. So the action tonight is like we did with the bond refinancing. It is authorizing the issuance of the bonds pursuant to parameters that are spelled out in the bond order before you. In the bond order before you, the parameters that are spelled out are we're authorizing the issuance at this time of $200 million of the voted authorization. Remember when we put together the plan, we were looking at selling it over the course of 2022 and 2023. So this plan calls for selling $200 million at this point, not having a final maturity that exceeds 8/15/2022, so essentially the 30 years that we talked about, and not having interest rates that exceed state law. Now, right now, we are still in a very low interest rate environment, but we have started kind of coming up off of those lows, and that's kind of what's depicted in this graph. The graph depicts the 10, the 20, and the 30-year MMD. That's the yield curve for which municipal bonds are priced. And here over the course of the past 3-4 weeks, we've really started moving somewhat off of those lows as the Fed has said, hey, a rate increase is coming. But I want to just make sure you all know this. We built in estimated increases in interest rates into our forecasting model. So we were not forecasting that we would sell the bonds at the all-time low interest rates. So we're still in a very good, historically speaking, we're still in a great rate environment and well within the parameters set forth in our financial models when we get ready to go out. So that's the heart of my presentation tonight. I'm happy to take any questions that you guys may have.
Anybody have any questions?
Or, of course, y'all can have all kinds of questions for Rob.
Well, no, thank you.
Okay.
Hopefully, we'll be able to, I see that, I guess what you're talking about, I guess when you look at this, the trending up has started.
That's right.
It's kind of in the middle of that
That's right.
view in there.
But
Yeah,
Jesse,
Ms. Warren?
projections for that interest rate hike are, I believe, April, aren't they?
Fed actually announced this week that they anticipate the first hike to occur in March. And so we ought to be we should be ready and in front of that rate hike. Now, truthfully, I believe much of that rate hike has already been priced into what's going on in the market anyway. But we anticipate being ready to be in the market before the actual rate hike takes place.
Okay, yeah.
With this sale.
Well, with that information, I move that we accept the administration's recommendation and authorize issuance of, from time to...
Do we need to read the whole? We don't need to read the whole.
Okay. I move that we accept the administration's recommendation. It's a really long paragraph.
Thank you, Ms. Cordaway.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Davis, for that second. Any further discussion or questions? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. All right.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Safe travels. More talk of finances. Mr. DeBurrow, regarding our audit. I thought I saw you behind that post over there. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. And Dr. Kincannon, members of the board, thank you for allowing me to meet with you this evening to go over the results of the fiscal year 2021 audit. And my name is John DeBurrow. I'm a partner with Weaver. This is my first time being involved with the district. I took over the account from Debbie Kirkham-Young, who used to come and do the presentations. And I have a PowerPoint presentation that I'd like to share with you that goes over a number of things. I'm not sure if it's loaded. Okay. Goes over a number of things, and I'll try not to take too much of your time because I know you had a busy agenda tonight. But this will go through an introduction to the audit process itself, go through our audit schedule and audit results, required communications, which are contained in the letter that you normally receive each year and should have received earlier this evening. Then I have a few slides that go through some financial highlights that are derived directly from this year and previous year's financial statements, and talk to you a little bit about some new standards. But before I begin, I just wanted to take a moment to thank Cheryl and the rest of her finance staff for doing a wonderful job in preparing for this year's audit. It was my first year being involved again with Waco ISD and with Cheryl and her crew, and they were fabulous to work with. They were very, very well prepared for this audit. That being said, those of you who aren't familiar with our firm, Weaver is actually one of the largest firms in the country now. We're among the top 35 firms in the U.S. When I began with the firm 18 years ago, we just had a Dallas and Fort Worth office, and now we're coast to coast. And even though we're a national firm now, we are always the firm of Texas. This is where our heart is, and our specialty is really in government entities and especially school districts. That's where our predominant practice is. I served as the engagement partner and Justin Herbert as the senior associate. He basically ran the day-to-day field work here, performing the various procedures. Going through the audit schedule and the audit process, the audit process involves planning and internal control work, and then what we call substantive testing, and then finally issuing our opinion on the district's financial statements. So we began planning the audit during the summertime and performed interim field work in July, which I'll go into a little bit of detail on. Then we performed the final field work in November and issued our audit opinion on the district's financial statements a couple of weeks ago. And in between that time, I'd like to point out that we're not just your firm for a day or a week, that we're here for you throughout the year. So that, in other words, after we've expressed our opinion on your financial statements, if Cheryl and her team has questions, maybe they're not sure on how to implement new standards, or there's a difficult transaction that's very complicated, I always make myself and my staff available to her, because that's when you need the help right then and there to make sure that you've recorded things correctly. So I'd just like to point out that fact. We conducted our audit in accordance with various standards this year, as we have in the past. We conduct our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, as well as the uniform guidance, which is what mandates the federal financial assistance audit. We also perform tests of the district's compliance with the Public Funds Investment Act and various compliance requirements of TEA. And we use what's called a risk-based approach to our audit, which means that we look at areas based on our experience with school districts and your district in particular, and we look at areas that could be of higher risk of material misstatement, and we tailor our resources a little bit more heavily in those areas. And I've named some of those, listed some of those on this slide, things such as federal and state grant revenues and expenditures and the related compliance requirements with those grants. The State Foundation School Program is another risk area. Construction and bidding procedures, things of that nature, and then your various liabilities like payables and accrued liabilities. So those are where we tend to weigh our resources more heavily. And when we came out to perform the interim field work in the summer, what we basically do then is, since the books aren't closed yet, we concentrate our efforts on walkthroughs of the internal controls of the districts over significant accounting transaction cycles like payroll, cash disbursements, various revenues, and financial close. And we get an understanding of the processes, and then we identify the controls. And if there had been any control deficiencies that we saw, then we would bring those to management's attention at that point in time. But I'm happy to report that we didn't note any control deficiencies in doing that work. And then we take actual transactions and we walk through them to make sure that the controls that were described to us are actually in process and operating as designed. Again, I mentioned that we performed capital projects testing, bid and procurement testing, and then we also performed tests of the district's controls over payroll and cash disbursements, looking at samples of both cash disbursements and payroll transactions to make sure that those controls are in place, as I mentioned. And then we use various techniques such as vouching significant transactions to source documentation, sampling, and using analytical procedures to test various activity from year to year and from current year to budget. And what you're probably waiting for are the audit results. Well, I'm happy to report that we've issued our independent auditor's report on your financial statements for the fiscal year ended August 31st, 2021. We've issued an unmodified opinion, which means that we feel that the district's financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects in accordance with GAAP. And we've issued a couple of other reports as well. One is our report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance. And we're happy to report that there were no findings in that report either, no significant deficiencies, no material weaknesses. And then finally, because we perform a single audit on the district's federal financial assistance programs, we issue a report. And in that report, we issued an unmodified opinion, which means that we feel that the district complied with all the direct and material compliance requirements of the major programs. So it was a very clean audit. We're also required to communicate to you if there are any significant audit adjustments that had to be made to arrive at the numbers in the financial statements. as well as any what are called uncorrected misstatements or past adjustments, and I'm happy to report that there were none of either type. And I won't go through all of these. I know that you're pressed for time this evening, but there are certain things in here that we're required to communicate to, and we looked through various estimates that are embodied in the financial statements of the districts, things such as the state foundation aid, which is really a big estimate because that number is being trued up throughout the year, the allowance for uncollectible taxes, the net pension liability and OPEB liabilities, and the depreciable lives of capital assets, and all looked reasonable in relation to the financial statements as a whole. There were no new auditing pronouncements or accounting pronouncements that had to be implemented this year. The district had previously implemented GASB 84 for the fiduciary activities. Next year will be another one on the horizon with the lease standard that has to be implemented that may have an effect on the district, but we'll make sure that we work with Cheryl and her team to make sure that that's properly implemented. Finally, I just wanted to go through some financial highlights just to kind of give you a high-level view of some of the numbers here. And the first two slides here deal with the district's governmental funds revenues. And overall, the district's governmental funds revenues for 2021 totaled $216.3 million. That was about a $10.4 million increase over the previous year, and it was split between the various revenue types. Federal revenues actually increased by $5 million, while state and local revenues each increased by 2.7, and this slide shows it a little bit better. It shows side-by-side comparisons of the revenue sources here, and you can see the federal revenues, which increased from $28.7 million in 2020 to $33.7 this most recent year. And a lot of that had to do with the COVID-related grant money for ESSER. And I also did a similar presentation for the governmental funds expenditures, looking at this year and last year. This year, total expenditures were $215.5 million, which was a $12.3 million increase over last year. And most of that was divided between increased construction costs due to the timing of capital outlay projects and instruction increases from the previous year. I know this slide small, but it does show side-by-side comparisons of the various types, and the biggest increase was the capital outlay because there was very little construction activity in the previous year. Overall, the district's fund balance at August 31st was $62.3 million. That was about a $1.9 million increase over the previous year. And out of that fund balance, the unassigned fund balance, which is $35.7 million, represents about 22% of the district's general fund expenditures. And finally, one other financial highlight that I wanted to share with you has to do with the general fund budgetary comparison schedule. The general fund, being the main operating fund of the district, had an overall favorable budgetary variance of $26.4 million this year. That's just the difference between budget and actual for both revenues and expenditures in the general fund. And that's the sum of two different things. The revenues exceeded budget by $2.1 million, while expenditures were under budget by $23.8 million due to cost savings in nearly every functional area. And that, in a nutshell, is my presentation. Again, the audit went extremely well. We had three major programs this year for the federal financial assistance, and Cheryl and her team did a great job. The controls were all there, and we found no exceptions in the areas of compliance or internal controls. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of you would have.
Dr. Kincannon, I heard you mention the Paul Tyson. If you could, if y'all don't mind just explaining the difference, as is in capital outlays was the amount of budgeted, and the expense was what, about $4 or $5 million on this state? Yeah.
The capital.
Well, there was a number of things. Part of that under expenditure was we also had to budget, remember we did the reimbursing resolution?
Yes.
So when we got the bond money. So we had a lot of the design fees for Waco High, as well as Carver budgeted. We had Paul Tyson budgeted. We had the CNS walk-in freezer cooler budgeted. Okay. Most of those did not get spent. And as you look in the audit, and we'll kind of go over that in the next month or so, we kind of tie out last year. But as you look at that, you'll see a lot of committed funds in our fund balance, and those are those projects that were out there. We committed them at the end of the year because we hadn't had the bond election yet, so we had to show that in our fund balance. Part of why our unassigned fund balance is lower than it's been, but it'll probably go back up once we get those funds all moved to capital projects as well. So there's some large variations, I think, this year because of capital projects.
Yep, thank you. Anybody else have a question? No? Thank you.
Well,
thank you for your work. You came up here from Houston?
I'm sorry, what?
Did you come up here from Houston?
No, from Dallas, actually.
From Dallas. Oh, okay. So safe travel home. A little closer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for your work. Thank you, Cheryl, for your work and your team. And thanks for another great audit report.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night. Oh, we need to approve it. I just keep moving through without getting votes. It's just a lot of good news. All right, I'll entertain a motion regarding the 2021 audit.
I move that we approve the administration's recommendation.
Thank you, Ms. Cordaway. Thank you, Mr. Vidania. Are there any further questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Passes unanimously. Thanks, everyone. Okay. 2022-2023 Instructional Calendar. Ms. Kornblum.
Good evening again. So each year, we ask that the board approve the instructional calendar for the upcoming school year. This calendar was taken to QDAC. We had 3 versions of the calendar at first. They reviewed it, and then we actually took it back to them again. And then we had a recommendation that we create a 4th calendar for consideration. And so we did that as well. And so we had somewhat of an emergency meeting at the beginning of January so that we could share the 4th calendar with them to give it time to be reviewed by them and then go out for voting. So when the calendars went out to vote, it was actually that 4th calendar that was chosen, which is what's presented here to you today. And so this calendar that's presented meets all the requirements. We have to have 75,600 minutes of instruction figured into the calendar, and those are there. All the major holidays that we normally have are listed and the same, so none of those changed from last year or this year to next year. The biggest change, though, is the school day. So we heard from a number of teachers over time that last year, they did enjoy when we were able to give them those, we called them COVID kind of flex days, I think is what we may have called them. I can't quite remember.
They were actually remote days.
Remote days, that's right.
And the state allowed us to do that last year. Mm-hmm. We had minutes banked last year because we had a longer school day.
Correct.
Then we took the minutes off this year because teachers didn't want those additional 15 minutes on the calendar. And so the only way to get planning days is to add time back to the calendar to meet that in-person requirement by the state. So I just took over. I'm sorry, I hijacked.
That's okay, that's fine.
I'll let you finish.
No, you're good. So yes, so that is exactly correct. And so, they stated that they enjoyed having that extra time, but there was no way to do that. And so it's kind of looking at, well, how do we make that possible for them? And so that was by adding the 15 minutes back. And so that went out for voting. All 3 did. And so calendar 4 was chosen, as I said. And it got about 40, a little bit over 40% of the vote, and it was also chosen by the community as well. So we are asking you tonight to approve the calendar for the 2022-2023 school year as presented, unless you have questions.
There's a footnote on there that there are protected planning
Correct.
dates for teachers, and so this was to make sure that we didn't schedule anything to take time away from their ability to do what they need to do.
There are actually 7 extra days given to teachers that will be on campus for planning. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't, the principal might not have them look at data or something to impact their planning, but there would be no professional development from the district level planned on those days. And so on your calendar, those days are listed at the very bottom of the calendar, on the 4th calendar.
Ms. Kornblum, could you kind of walk us through the process of QDAC? So QDAC, they usually appoint a representative each campus.
Campus, community, business, district personnel, yes, parents as well.
Then QDAC, the representative, goes back to their said campus, goes back to their said, takes a vote on that calendar, so then the campus has a vote on that, or how does that work?
No, not exactly. So they come and we present to them, and so if they recommend any, tweaks or modifications, we come back and we do that. So we actually showed this to them for the first time, I think it was November. And so then we meet again after we have made any revisions that they've requested and let them look at it again. And then if they are in agreement, then those are the calendars that go out and vote. But they were given all 3 calendars from the beginning, and yes, they can share them on their campuses. Now, the vote happens from the district level. That goes out and is run by our communications department. They put it out on email, district websites, school websites, those types of things.
Every person has an opportunity.
Yes. And it ran, the voting period ran for 2 weeks.
Okay. No, that's great. Thank you. I was thinking back to when I was on QDAC, and when our process was, we get the calendars, take it back to the campus, have the discussion at the campus level, get the consensus, go back to QDAC, kind of do that. So thank you. That's helpful to know that email's.
Yeah. And we did encourage them to encourage people on their campuses to vote and to let them know that it was out there. Please go vote.
Yeah.
So.
And as a former teacher, those protected planning days are like gold. I mean, that is where there's no professional development, where you're not pulled in a million different directions and you want to just get stuff done.
Right. And the question was asked, I'm just going to put it out there in case anyone's wondering, well, could we not have done that without adding minutes to the day and give them 7 days of planning? So what we really tried to do is give them at least 1 a month, pretty much. And there was no way to do that without, we would have actually, if you took the 15 minutes off, we would have had a deficit. So we have to have the 75,600. And so if we would have taken the minutes off, we would have had 75,060 minutes. So that gives us no extra days for planning, nor does it give us extra days for bad weather or anything that, might occur. Yeah.
One more question. I don't remember our current calendar. I know we kind of revisited it several times and approved kind of a new calendar kind of midstream, just because COVID has made us pivot so much. On this calendar, we basically, or correct me if I'm wrong, please, we've basically just added minutes to the day, but we haven't necessarily eaten into summertime. Is that?
No. The school year, the length of the school year is the same. And in fact, when the 4th calendar was first presented, there were 2 days where the teachers came back after May 26th, and no, they don't really want to do that. And so, but that was to get the 187 contract days that are required. And so, but that was in an effort to try to shorten the time at the beginning, because we had also heard from them that they would like fewer days at the beginning to not go into the school year so tired. So last year we had 10. By putting those days at the end, it took it to 6, and then, and some others scattered around, and we just took some off, quite frankly. And then they said, well, now we're not sure if 6 is enough to get us ready for school. So then we took the 2 that we had in May and put them back on the front, so now they have 8 days prior to school starting to, part of that's campus, and then, of course, some of that will be district. So it's kind of a compromise where that was concerned. And those recommendations came from QDAC, and feedback that they got from their campuses once they went back and came back to the committee.
What would you say, sorry, I don't know if you have this information or not, but what would you say was the percentage of response? So you guys kind of sent out an email or survey.
Yeah.
Did you have like 50% response?
Community response was lower. It wasn't wasn't hugely lower than last year, I would say. Now, the teacher response more than doubled. And so we had over 600 responses from teachers. Now, obviously, I won't say teachers, staff, because that could have been anyone. Obviously, that's not all of our staff, but last year we only had 300 and some who voted.
Do you mind, just for those who don't know what QDAC is?
Quality District Advisory Committee.
I have a question. So the community members who are QDAC, if I'm a community member and I wanted to be on the committee, how would I do that?
So campuses also elect, much like Ms. Hamilton described earlier. And then in some instances, like for your community members and others, we take recommendations from folks, and we try to get a wide variety. I ran QDAC the previous years, the past 2 years, I guess, and then Dr. Gutierrez is actually running the QDAC committee this year, and then I insert the calendar into her meetings, but that's how. But recommendations. But I mean, it's open if someone just had a large interest to come and listen and hear, and that would be welcome.
I would remind you that policy says this committee has to be comprised of 2/3 of teachers. So this committee is heavily focused on teachers getting their input on very specific topics that are outlined in policy.
Yeah.
Calendar happens to be one of those topics.
Professional development is another.
And if I may sidetrack just a little bit and talk about this year's calendar, I just want to remind you all, we have 2 days of banked minutes of instruction for bad weather. So, last year we had the full week of bad weather. We have 2 days, and I may be bringing you a recommendation, should we not use those days, to at least use one of them for a teacher planning day in the spring. But I want to hold out on that and just to see what happens with the weather over the next several weeks. So just wanted to mention that so you're not surprised to see it coming later.
All right, thank you. I'll entertain a motion regarding the calendar.
I move we accept the administration's recommendation and approve the 2022-2023 instructional calendar as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Cordaway. A second? Thank you, Mr. Davis. Any further questions? Discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. A lot of work. A lot of good work. All right, Ms. Bell. Good evening. Public hearing regarding the 2021 TAPER report, Texas Academic Performance Report. So this is actually a meeting for a hearing for the public. So if anybody here listening tonight has a question, please speak up. And I don't know that I need to formally close our meeting, but I'll recognize that it is a public hearing, and then we'll resume our meeting with announcements. All right, Ms. Bell.
Okay, good evening.
We're going to talk about the TAPER, as it's called, the Texas Academic Performance Reports, the public report published by TEA each year. This will cover the 2020-21 school year. However, I want you to be aware that the TAPER pulls together a large variety of data, and some of this data represents different time periods depending on when TEA collects and analyzes it. Waco ISD is accredited, and our accountability rating is the same as every other district in the state, and that is not rated declared state of disaster. So it's been a declared state of disaster for 2 years. We do have our 2020 special education determination status as needs substantial intervention, which is the same as last year. To explain that a little further, the evaluation of special education is a set of indicators that TEA uses that are specific markers of student performance, as well as some federally required elements of compliance for special education students. So again, our rating is needs substantial intervention. To go a little deeper, while we have the needs substantial intervention, there have been improvements in the data points for special education reported from TEA. So you can see TEA looks at STAR, dropout rate, graduation rate, early childhood programs for special education, the proportion in classrooms, disciplinary removals, and then some compliance pieces for special education itself. We had a decrease in the dropout rate, which is a good thing, and an increase in the graduation rate. We had a decrease in the disciplinary removals, which is important because TEA is holding us accountable for students being out of class and missing instructional time, so we continue to work on that. You'll notice in compliance, we've gone from a 77% compliance in 18-19 to a 97.9% compliance rate in 2021, and that has indicators for early childhood transition, secondary transition. One more note, we were lower in regular early childhood programs, but when I get further on, when we look at enrollment and drops in enrollment, you're going to see that the enrollment for pre-KK overall for all students was down considerably last year. The ratings, as I said, were the same for all campuses. Please note that when I talk about the district data in the TAPER, the Transformation Waco campus data is compiled in. All of the campuses received the rating of not rated declared state of disaster. But it's important to note that campuses that were labeled for school improvement in the 18-19 school year have had that same label and different types of requirements for the past 2 years because we've not had any new accountability ratings. We'll begin with STAR data. So this STAR data comes from the spring administration of 2021. A reminder that STAR data comes in 3 levels: approaches, meets, and masters. So this data here is the approaches or above, so it includes all 3 levels. Throughout the presentation, you'll see that the blue bars represent the district's data and the state's is beside it in the yellow bars, so you can get a sense of comparison. I would like to note the writing test. I put it at, this past year was the last year TEA is administering a writing test. This year we will have a reading test, and starting in the 22-23 school year, there will be one test that is combined, reading and writing together. So TEA is going to be rolling that out in phases. You don't just change the test right away. But I wanted to make that note for you on the writing scores. This is meets. And masters. To break the data down for you a little bit differently to see how Waco ISD and the state were affected from 2019 to 2021, Waco ISD's trends matched those of the state. So our numbers don't match, but the decreases match. So on reading here, both Waco ISD and the state dropped 3% masters. Waco ISD dropped 5%, and the state dropped 3% for meets or above. And for approaches, Waco ISD dropped 10%, and the state dropped 7%. So our decreases were comparable with what was happening in the rest of the state for reading. For math, for masters, Waco ISD went down 7%, the state went down 8%. For meets or above, Waco and the state both went down 15%. And approaches, Waco ISD decreased by 23% and the state by 16%. So again, the decreases were pretty comparable. Science, Waco ISD decreased in masters by 6%. The state decreased by 5%. For meets, Waco ISD decreased by 15% and the state by 10%. And for approaches or better, Waco ISD decreased by 19% and the state by 10%. For social studies, Waco ISD and the state dropped 4% in masters. Meets, Waco ISD dropped 7%, the state dropped 6%, and approaches, we dropped 12%, and the state dropped 8%. So in all 4 of the subject areas, our decreases were right on trend with what was happening across the rest of the state. Our next set of data is attendance data, and this is going to be using 2018-19 and 19-20 data to compare. So the attendance rate increased about 3% for both the state and for Waco ISD. But I have a note for you that this represents, the increase represents the COVID closure in the spring of 2020. And so rules were changed for taking attendance during that time, so we'll have to look and see long-term if how our attendance rates stay the same. Along with attendance, TEA added a new metric called chronic absenteeism. These are students who are enrolled 10 or more days in our district at any time and are absent for 10% of however many days they're enrolled. Both the state and Waco ISD decreased by 5%. So the right is 2018-19 and the left is 19-20. But again, I remind you that in the spring of 2020, attendance taking was quite different because of the COVID closure during that time. Our next set of data is dropout rates, and this is data from 2018-19 and 2019-20 school years. So for dropout rates, we have had a very focused action plan from TEA to improve this area for multiple years. 7 and 8, grades 7 and 8, we had an increase, as the state did, in the percentage of dropouts. However, I want to point out how many kids this actually represents. We went from 7 students in grades 7 to 8 to 12. So we're going to work on a more targeted focus plan since it's a small group of students. But for grades 9 through 12, we went from 4.2% as a district to 2.9%. We decreased that dropout rate by 1.3, while the states remained relatively the same, 1.9 to 1.6. To focus that in a little more, dropouts are only counted once. Students can return to school once they're a dropout. It doesn't hinder them in any way. But if a student drops out and returns and drops out at a later date, that student doesn't count in this data metric again. And so I think that helps you to see the impact we're having if students are only counted once. From 2014-15, we see that increase in dropouts. And in 19-20, we had less than all previous years of dropouts. So we're working to recover students, we're working to keep students and support them, and then the preventative measures for them dropping out in the first place.
Can I,
the sister to dropout question?
A little bit less of a question and more of a comment. When I was going through this, I think the academics, because of COVID, kind of some of that was expected and looking at the state. But when I looked at the dropout rates, I wanted to jump out of my chair, because I think that type of work, the trend in the right direction, that takes a huge amount of work from a team of people. I mean, if you've ever worked with kids, you know that to get those numbers is not easy work. And so I just really wanted to commend Kincannon, you guys, the schools, the campuses, because to really encourage kids, I remember some of the plans, they're going, tracking down kids. I think that really those numbers prove that. And I wanted to commend everyone who really is invested in our kids. And these numbers, these numbers are showing the trend in the right direction, and I think when you have a trend in the right direction and it's slow and incremental, then you're heading the right way and that systems are being changed and that things are happening at a pace that people can
kind of pivot with.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
yeah,
It was really intentional work. Denise did most of that work. She held cohort meetings with both of the high school campuses, with Brazos. She tracked kids. She called kids, interviewed kids. She stayed on it. And so very appreciative of her work. And that was a huge focus area for us in 2019, 2020.
And Denise, do you have an idea what the 2021 number is going to be?
I don't offhand, because it's a squirrely kind of way to calculate this, but I know that it may go up, but then last year with virtual learning is an anomalous year. But if it does, we're just going to pivot again and improve the action plan for, okay, if kids left us, we're really working on getting them back. That, you know, even if they were a dropout and they're in these numbers, I still want them back, because it's better for Waco as a city for these children to graduate with an education. So that's really important, so.
I had a question. The numbers we're getting from the 1920 school year, are those affected by like what was going on with COVID at that time? I know it was STAR tests that were kind of waived and a lot of things going on. So did that affect these numbers?
Remember, COVID hit in March of 20.
Right.
So we were pretty much through that school year.
So I think that's pretty impressive on the campus's part, that spring of 2020, the seniors were worried about their ceremony, and everybody was worried about health and life, and yet we still managed to hold on to our kids and to really, what we did was tighten up the systems for the kids to slip through and just leave us and not be tracked. So we go out and we get them and we bring them back in and kind of reboot. So I feel like it's going to have some effect on the 2021 numbers, especially with the virtual, but if that happens, then Denise Bell will just call more kids and get them back. Okay, so the sister data metric to dropout rate is graduation rate, and we want this one to improve. So I want to remind you that the graduation, diploma, and CCMR data comes from the classes of 2020, 2019, and 2018. There's always a year lag for TEA to clean up this data. So for Waco ISD, we had a 4-year graduation rate of 83.9%, which was an increase of 4.6%. And our 5-year rate was 82.5, which was an increase of 31%. And then our 6-year rate went down, but that's what we want. Before it was flipped, and our 6-year rate was the highest. We don't want kids to take 6 years. We really want that 4 years and having them move into post-secondary opportunities. The state's numbers are beside there, and you can see that they've been pretty consistent between 90 and 92. So what this shows us is that the students are graduating within 4 years at a higher rate in Waco ISD. And again, the 2020 spring for those seniors, I mean, those kids are going to have a story to tell someday when they're talking to their grandkids about that spring. Going with that is the type of diploma that we have our students receive. So there's 2 types of diplomas. There's the basic foundation high school program, and then there's the foundation program that's distinguished, which has an endorsement, a program of study of some type, and students having Algebra 2. So this area increased as well. So we went from 69.7% of students graduating distinguished to 77. So what does this tell us? More students are graduating within 4 years, and they're graduating with a higher diploma, which means more credits, more work, and so we're really proud of our kids. I put on there the data point for you that the state actually remained the same. So this increase is ours. It's not the state's, not a trend. In accountability, we're measured for TEA's criteria for college, career, and military-ready graduates. So TEA has very specific indicators that students have to show that they are career, college, or military-ready for life after high school. These numbers represent students who met one or more. So sometimes a student does multiple things, and they're in the data. Both the state and Waco ISD saw a decrease in the CCMR piece for students. So Waco ISD went from 68.9 to 46.9, meeting more than one indicator, but we see the state saw a drop as well. So when I show you what the indicators are, it might make sense why we saw that decrease in that spring of 2020. So we saw a slight decrease in AP performance, which was wonderful to see our kids just, getting recognized for AP performance. But in the spring of 2020, College Board had a lot of trouble testing kids virtually nationally. So we should see that number come to swing back up. Dual credit went down from 29 to 18, but that's because our kids went from face-to-face to virtual learning, and so did every college student. So the TSTC and MCC that we shared dual credit with, they had a lot of adjustment, not just for our high school kids, but overall. But we did see an increase in industry-based certification, and that was intentional work you'll see when I talk about the next slide. We were able to get kids to come in during that spring, if we could, during the summer, and during a small part of the fall of 2020. And I have to commend Donna McKethan and her team. They really did a great job of trying to get kids in to take these tests and graduate with these pieces. Okay. Then we have indicators for certifications, graduation type, and special ed, which are holding the same. But the real reason Waco ISD decreased is not about COVID, it's about the two last measures. So we had 18% of our class of 2019 be deemed as CCMR for military readiness. So enlistment. This was reported by districts. Well, in 2020, TEA took that away. No district reports that any longer because there were some very interesting numbers that people had for how to prove it. This does not mean our students are not enlisting. It means that TEA no longer allows us to report students and get credit in accountability. So nothing has changed from our enlistment or involvement with the military. And that last piece, that 16 and 15%, is completing a CTE course of study. Well, students are only analyzed for that if they didn't get a point anywhere else. So you can see the district was leaning heavily into having 15% of the graduates have CTE. TEA phased that out. And so that's why you're seeing the slight shift, the uptick in the industry-based certification. So the CTE programs shifted from just completing to completing with certifications that go along with that. Okay, so our district profile, I know this guy, he's in the room. This is the makeup of the district. For our enrollment, again, this data is from 2019-20 to 2020-21. I remind you the 2020-21 school year was when virtual was an option for parents and students. Our greatest decrease was in pre-K and K. Parents were hesitant about putting their students in schools, so that affected the special education metric we talked about before, about early programs for those students. For secondary, any questions? Okay. For secondary, our drop was in grade 9, but this is not unusual in a district. Usually parents, if they're going to make a change, it's at high school. So our drop in 9th graders and parents choosing other high schools or virtual high schools may have been the choice there. The ethnic distribution of Waco ISD has not changed at all. None of the particular areas of our student enrollment changed more than 1%. For student information, these are the programs our students are enrolled in and the percentage. So we have 8% GT, 76% at risk, 4% homeless, coming to 504, 7.9, and economically disadvantaged to 91. Our ELL and special education programs, 20.8% of our students are emergent bilingual, which is the new federal phrase for EL student, and 10.3% of our students are special education. And you can see that it breaks those students up into the types of disabilities that students have. And it says primary because sometimes students may have more than one area, so we identify one primary. Teacher demographics by gender, education, and ethnicity. Teacher turnover is something that we've been working on. So teacher turnover is the percent of those who are Waco ISD teachers in 2019 and not Waco ISD teachers at the beginning of the next school year because they left the district or they moved to a different role. So it's important to note if a teacher comes up to be an instructional specialist or an assistant principal, it's counted as turnover because the teacher left the classroom. But you can see Waco ISD had a greater decrease than the state. We had a decrease of 4.7% turnover. So even though our rate is higher than the state, we're getting closer. We're gaining those grounds. our teacher experience compared to the state, and then our teacher experience compared to ourselves over time, shifting, because if we're keeping teachers, we'll begin to see that experience move higher up. The two top bars, TEA used to report it out as 20 years and over, so they've begun to separate that into 21 to 30 and then over 30 years. And finally, the report from the Texas Higher Education Reporting Board. So these are the 2018 graduates. So higher ed follows our students after they leave for a couple of years and report back to us on how they're doing. So of our 923 graduates, these are the universities in Texas that reported those students as being enrolled. And then finally, for graduates and higher ed for their performance, we can see that we had a drop for the class of 2019 going down, but I'm really proud of the metric over on the right, because what it's showing you is that this is the percent of our kids who are in college who got through their first year of college without any developmental classes, no remediation. Waco ISD went up 4%, and the state came down from 60 to 42. So we're sending our kids in, not just with those higher diplomas, we're sending them in with less need for developmental work. So that was the last slide. Any questions?
All right. Does anyone have a question in the audience or from the board? All right. Yes, Ms. Corwin.
I just want to say thank you, because I know that this is a concerted effort from all of our teachers, our administrators, and making sure that we not only track our kids, but that we provide them good opportunities. And whenever I see trends eking the right way, it gets me really excited, because we're making the right steps in the right direction. And I know that COVID has been a interesting dynamic, a challenging dynamic. And I know teachers and administrators, everyone is tired. But I just want to commend our faculty, our staff, for continuing to every day to show up, every day to look after our kids. It doesn't go unnoticed, and I am so grateful that our staff is investing in the kids in this community, and we're better because of it. So
thank you. I always like to think, for as tough as it is for us as adults, the high schoolers right now are going through many things, so getting them back, getting that education is the best thing we can do for them. Okay.
All right, we'll close the public hearing, reopen the board meeting, and Mr. Beer has the announcements, looks like.
Thank you, Madam President. As part of the consent agenda tonight, the board ordered a general election to fill full 3-year terms for trustees representing District 4 and District 5, and a special election to fill the final year of the unexpired term for an at-large trustee in the vacancy created by Trustee Dupuy's resignation. We want to encourage everyone to participate in that election, and want to underscore a couple of key dates looking forward. The first being April 7th, which is the deadline to register to vote in the May trustee election. Early voting starts on April 25th, and Election Day, of course, is May 7th. The other election-related announcement we'd like to hit on tonight is that there is an opportunity for our high school students who are 16 and older to become clerks in that election and any of the other elections happening this year. There's great work and partnership happening between the district and our community partners to recruit 16-year-old, 17-year-old high school students to participate in that opportunity, and so we want to underscore that that's out there as well. And with those election notes, that's all I have.
Thank you very much. With that, we are adjourned. Good night.